Welcome to Session 7 of the Digital Disruption in Agriculture Conference. This session is going to give us a perspective from agri-software developers. We've heard a lot over the last couple of days about the potential, the possibilities, the use cases. We've also heard about some of the impediments, the policy that needs to be sorted out, regulatory issues, privacy, ownership concerns. How all of that is translated a lot of the time is you know, the actual interface that we have is the software at the end of the day, how we're interacting with digital agriculture and big data applications. So we're going to try and get a perspective now from agri-software developers about how all of these things that we've been hearing about are influencing what they think in terms of what they're thinking about how software is developed, what the possibilities are, what the uses are, and how it's changing what we know as ag software and how we interact with it. So our first speaker is Mark Pawsey, who is the General Manager of SST Software Australia. Welcome, Mark, to the floor, please.
Thanks, Richard. And look, credit, I think, to Mick Keogh and the group here. I can't believe the number of faces that it feels like in the last 5 years, my roaming around Australia since I came back from the US, I think most people are here that I've spoken to over those years, so it's credit to getting everyone in the same room. Yep, I'll just briefly touch on SST as a company. We formed in 1996, so we've been around the block a few times, and we formed in the Corn Belt of the US, which is now a pretty, pretty lucky event in the sense that we had to engage in a market that was geospatial, needed to do grid soil sample variable rate for the US Corn Belt, so we were thrown into the deep right from the outset. And so to get through those first 10 years, we had to invest and build some pretty rigorous technology and some pretty scalable industrial type tools, and that now looks very wise in the sense that as we come back down across the feature set of agriculture, we've got a really powerful data set that we can sort of adapt and mould to what's going on. Global focus, look, Australia's a small market. It's very hard to build and justify a system for the Australian market, and apart from that, everyone wants to go global. All the tech companies in the US want to come here because it looks like a good market, and vice versa. So to think that we can do anything that's constrained or specialised to Australia is just not really going to get it done. As a company, we focus on the farm service provider. We set ourselves up that way to support ag retail. We've never swayed from that. We just don't think a technology company going to farmer is the right approach. And in 2016, 20 years from after we got started, we're still a software company and we'll continue to be one, but we're now focusing on interoperable platform, and I'll certainly talk to that as I go through. We've got a fairly large footprint. Anyone that knows the Corn Belt pretty much knows that that's where it's at. There aren't too many gaps in that, but that doesn't mean that we're working intensively on every one of those fields. But that's really driven by ag retail through the Corn Belt and the rest of the US. In Australia, we're obviously building our system out as we are in Brazil, South Africa, Ukraine, a very attractive market potentially if we can manage to work there. So most of all of that is driven by service provider provision to farmer. So about 2 years ago, the Iowa Ag State Group commissioned a study by the Hale Group, and we kind of like this slide because on a matrix of ability to execute and completeness of vision, we're in that top 5 global category with some pretty well-known identities there. The interesting thing that came out of that was their comment that we were the only company focused purely on data. We don't sell seed, we don't sell machinery, we don't sell anything else. We don't sell data, that's a big one, let's get that right there. But we work with data. So This is our premise, that we believe going forward that the entire ag supply chain will be driven by that field boundary. We think it's fundamental. Agriculture is inherently spatial, and we can't see any other way than to identify with that and work with that. So as a company, we put a lot of effort into that field boundary. It's super important because it's the bucket for everything we do. Today, the industry is pretty much focused on the agronomist, the farmer, and the stakeholders on the farm, but we in no way see, and the theme of this conference about disruption, I think the next big horizon is to start to engage the supply chain in a digital fashion. And I know we're talking about disruption, but I challenge that maybe some of this isn't disruptive in the sense that some of our digital supply chain actually doesn't exist. So maybe we're innovating and not actually disrupting, but that's to be determined. So I'm just going to quickly run through the SST software platform, not hopefully as a hard sell, but just to frame the fact that it's all interoperable, which will lead me into the fact to demonstrate the industry platform we're making available in that same vein, and then maybe look at some of those disruption opportunities. So we've built our portfolio around people and roles. So we've tried to target the right tool for the farmer, the right tool for the agronomist. The PA technician, we really don't want our agronomists messing with data intensively. We want them doing agronomy with data and using it for decision making, but not necessarily wrestling with the data itself. And obviously up into the corporate ag space where we're starting to work in the analytics realm. And we can do that, we believe, because of the standardisation that I'll speak to here in a moment. So, as I said, quick look at our tools. We for the Australian market particularly, we need to deal with the basics of agronomy. A flat rate spray rec, if that's all someone wants to do, but let's do it digitally. It's not dismissing anything, it's just getting down to the very grassroots of what needs to be done. But in our system, we bring a partner in like GeoSys, and suddenly we've got a crop imagery into that environment, and maybe a yield map, or maybe some other data. Now we're doing zonal soil sampling. So or zonal tissue testing against the NDVI. We're just evolving the industry along, hopefully, rather than trying to be revolutionary. We're just trying to evolve what we do today, do it a little better, and do it digitally. And if you take one more step, hey, we're doing precision ag. Now, I'd like to redefine the term precision ag from the outset, get rid of it, call it digital agriculture, but that's a whole other discussion. We've added an iPhone app which does everything that the iPad does, just you need glasses on a small screen. The next level, you can only do so much on an iPhone or iPad, so we need machine integration. And for that, we're relying on a desktop solution, although we're quickly moving toward API-driven web interfaces where relevant, but it doesn't mean someone shouldn't be able to offline import some data. So now we're able to talk to all those machines via thumb drive, or as you can see at the bottom there, wireless API access where we're allowed in. And many of these companies, credit to FieldView and Raven and John Deere, they're openly allowing us into that environment to move data back and forward, which is great. Decision support. Now we've got a whole lot of data. What are we going to do with it? That's been the whole dilemma of putting a yield map on the fridge and a pretty picture. We've got to get beyond that. So we've built an online cloud-based logic engine, and so our customers embed their logic there. We've got some we provide to get them started, and it allows differentiation, customisation, and dare I say it, productisation. This has got to be commercial. We've got to be able to turn these things into product. Or we're never going to get the economy of digital agriculture going. So don't shy away from the fact that what we're trying to create here is information products. And finally, in our portfolio is the regional analytics. So thanks again to the standardisation I'll speak to here now, is that we believe we can really start to empower aggregation of data with meaningful analytics. And of course, don't worry, I'll cover the administration and security of all this as I go forward, but an organisation can start to get a lot of value out of all that data they're collecting at the coalface. Our premise, of course, is that digital ag needs to have its first value as a services and a first use to the farmer. If we get that done, there's value in capturing it, and we capture it in the right format. Well, now the game's on. So, as I said, our products are all fully interoperable. We spent 20 years making sure that you import data into one product and it shows up in another. You edit it in something, the edit reflects in another. So, over the last 15 years particularly, we've built this system that we can add a new product tomorrow and know that it will be completely interoperable with everything else we've done. So, we, thanks to some market pressure and our own choice, we've decided to take that one step further and license that to the industry. So AgX is now a suite of APIs that is available without preference, competitor or whatever in the software space, to anyone in the industry who wants to work with it and help us build an ecosystem of interoperable applications. And so it's now, as I said, a suite of third-party integration tools we're putting out there. So our system is a database, it's a schema, and we're gradually completing out that suite of APIs. They're not all done yet, but over the next 6 months or so, we think we can complete that where anything that's able to be stored in the database will be available as an API. So we'll have a separate yield API and an imagery API and so forth. Now, the reason we're doing that, why do we think we need to do that? There seems to be 3 approaches to the industry at the moment as to how this digital ag is going to get done. And one of them is the one company provides everything model. Now, we don't believe that will work. We know damn well that we as a software company can never provide everything you need. Farmer, agronomist, whoever you are, it's just impossible that one vendor can be best of breed at everything that's ever going to be needed. So we just don't think that will work. So what's the next step? The next option is APIs. Everyone loves an API at the moment, nearly as much as a drone. You've got to have a drone and an API. If there were only ever 4 companies in this industry, that would work, because what we're talking about there is import, unpack and translate. I'm not going to get technical because I'm not particularly technical. An API just means a pipe. It just means you can put data down the pipe. It doesn't mean that anything inside it is standardised. So it means that you might actively import something, but you've then probably got to unpack it, translate it to have it any value, because it's probably spelt or framed or means something different in your system to the one it originated from. So again, that might work if there are only 4 companies, but it's pretty quickly going to look like that. And we believe in some cases we're nearly there with a few industry segments. So there is just no way that moving data around that kind of matrix will work with what everyone's terming as a direct one-to-one API. So we believe what's needed is synchronous data movement around a standardised ecosystem. So our tools, as I've said, are all interoperable, but we're now starting to work with a whole range of partners, tractor controller companies like Raven. FieldView is using the AgX reference language, to software developers, AdaptN, who do nitrogen modelling, and I'll explore this a little bit, are all coming in around an ecosystem of interoperable data. And it looks like that. So we're actively in discussion with every one of those companies. Many of them are already on the AgX platform and exchanging data. But a farmer is going forward. If we are going to be a digital ag industry, pretty much every vendor, every player is going to go digital. And if that case, now we've got digital applications we have to engage with. And so a farmer will simply not, or a service provider, manage 10 databases to drive 10 apps. All right, so how do we do it? I'm not going to get technical, as I said, but it requires an investment in structure. So we've gone ahead and built this schema, which has what we call reference data, descriptors and so forth, around this spatial repository and permissions and security, which I'll cover in a minute. And obviously then we pass it out as APIs. I think the reason we've been able to do this is that as a company, we've got terrific domain knowledge. We've got over 50% of our staff have got more than 8 years tenure. And that's allowed us to build a team and to just keep dragging knowledge forward and learning. God, we've made mistakes that most people never thought of doing. It's incredible what the dry gullies we've gone up, but I think that's why we've been able to pull this together. Spatial standardisation is essential if we want interoperability. We just cannot get away from that if we want it to be truly interoperable without human intervention. So, just to bring you in on some of the realities, that's the sort of stuff we have to deal with. You know, we need 140,000 reference descriptors, and we haven't even got started yet. You know, the minute we go into a new industry sector, horticulture particularly, but whatever, we get bombarded with all these new things we have to add to the database so that you can collect the data you want to collect. Things like letting people call a weed what they want to call it, mapping it back to its scientific name. You know, things you just don't visualise when you look at something like this. The spatial standardisation. We are not just a standard. In fact, we are not a standards. We are just doing what we need to do to make stuff work. Standardisation is different from standards. Let's get that out there from the beginning. So we're standardising data. We're not being a standard. That includes spatial. We have to deal with all this stuff. You know, not letting people create bow ties and overlapping field boundaries. And, you know, it seems trivial, but believe me, if you want to do anything with spatial data, geospatial record keeping, that stuff has to be tidy. So we do a lot of work on that. Standardised hierarchy, grower farm field. Really important we get that nailed down. Moving forward. Right, the big one, security. Peter brought up before about the term ownership. We don't use it because we can't ascribe ownership. It's just not something we can do. We focus on administration, and we believe that gives a control. It's equivalent to ownership. It achieves everything we're trying to achieve using the term ownership, but we can't use the term. We just can't. So we embed administration into the technology because, you know, a legal document that says this is my data, I own it, doesn't matter a damn if it can physically leak away. So we make it a physicality of control. So one thing we shouldn't miss is also the social disruption that's coming down the pipe, you know, trying to get people to the place they need to be to engage. Now, disruption. I'm probably running over time, but I'll get it done. Look, this industry, there's only about 20 or 30 data elements that we need to capture, and everybody needs them. So are we seriously going to, you know, capture them over and over and over again to drive every single application? That's just crazy. So clearly we can't do that. The goal here is to have interoperable data. If I edit in one environment, one piece of software or application, it updates every other piece. That's the goal here. We capture our yield data once, we work with it once. And in disrupting the services channel, we've all seen some imagery over the last couple of days. There's another one. But in our case, you go out and look for that red blob, and it turns out it's duck damage. Ducks are coming out of the pond. And the agronomist has been able to record the fact that in that location it was ducks. I don't know what you do about it, but it was ducks. Disrupting the soil testing market. It's primed for disruption by just going from one test to 3. Okay? I'll skip over that because I really am running out of time. But why are we going to keep testing 4 soil types as one bag of dirt when we've got all the technology to just infinitely gather more data for the cost of a couple of extra soil tests? The technology disruption, AgSolver are a company, so we import a yield map into AgX, pass it over to AgSolver, and they give us back, you put your AgX account credentials into there. Hey, there's the same yield map. I didn't touch it, it just turned up in another application, and they give me a zonal budgeting outcome. Let's go back to the same. We add a planting event, and AdaptN come to the play, and I put my credentials into AdaptN, and I get back a nitrogen model every week. I haven't entered a thing into that other piece of software. I've just enrolled and said go. Real opportunity. I have a pretty complicated train smash of a career of all sorts of different industries, of production planning to ag retail, and it's suddenly paying off because I can see that there's so many opportunities in the supply chain. You know, engaging with the the chemical companies in a way that has a value proposition that works for everybody. You know, collect the data, find a way to share it where everyone gets a value out of it securely, and we can get this thing done. And of course, the final slide, hopefully I've nailed the timing, is small data is where it's at. If we do it right and capture it right, we've got big data. Do we understand it? No. Do we know how to make value out of it? No, but that's a journey we can go on. But we won't get there if we keep collecting this shotgun of data formats and locking it up in proprietary islands of value. You know, it's going to be a long, long road to get there. So that's me. Thank you.